Okay, hello everyone. My name is Liz Sanchez, and I am a graduate student at Ohio University with Wellbeing and Fitness. And I have the pleasure of doing a Wellbeing Talk series, and this is the 4th week. And so tonight I have the privilege to introduce to you Baron Miller, who's going to be talking about resiliency. And so if you all, have any questions at the end, we're going to be doing a Q&A, but this is going to be a pretty interactive talk tonight. And so we're just really excited for you to be here, and there will be interaction. So if you can have your cameras on, that would be great. Just remember to stay muted until it would be your time to talk. But everyone, if you could, just welcome Baron Miller.
Sorry, she muted me. Tim from Thanksgiving. What's really weird is that I know people on here. Like, I'm familiar with 50% of the people that I'm seeing and sitting with right now. And I'm not even from this state. This is so interesting. All right. Well, like Liz said, my name is Baron Miller. I'm a chaplain in the Navy. We're doing this live from my home. In case most of you guys may not know, Liz lived with me and my wife and kids when the lockdown happened last year. So we're actually in a spare bedroom, which functioned as your bedroom for about 5 months or so. I want to give you a little bit about my background, and then what we're going to do is jump into some subject matter, particularly around resiliency, and as it pertains very specifically to suicide prevention. And so we're going to be having very frank conversation around suicide, intervention, some technique stuff. And the resiliency piece has a lot to do with you as the participant today, and things that you can do in a self-care sense to help you be resilient, not just against suicide, creating suicide safer communities, but also in just a general wellness sense. So I joined the Marine Corps in 1995 when I was 18 years old, and I did 5 years as a Marine. I was a avionicsman. I worked on helicopters, and I was terrible at it, but I was a decent swimmer, and so I became a rescue swimmer. So I flew with helicopters, and I did search and rescue work. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to college, I went to seminary, I became a pastor. And for many years that I worked as a civilian pastor, I also served at a nonprofit agency called Support Officers. I'm from Bellingham, Washington, so north of Seattle, about 89 miles. And Support Officers was a nonprofit agency that recruited local clergy like myself, and we would get a dispatch from the 911 dispatchers whenever there was a sudden or tragic fatality. And I would go to the scene where police were there, EMS was there, and I would provide some crisis, some real triage counseling and care for families or people affected by whatever fatality just occurred. So in the course of about 3 years doing this, I went to over 70 deaths. And if I look at all the numbers, which is kind of depressing, 24 of which were suicides. And so I've been on the scene, in the home typically, where some suicide occurred, and anywhere from teenagers all the way to geriatric age folks. By the time I joined the Navy and became a chaplain, a lot of that exposure really has helped me in this job. I know some of us have heard the statistics of veterans and military people and suicide, and one of the reasons why we have such good statistics on this in the military is because they track everything about us all the time. Walmart does not know how many of its employees have died by suicide. They just know that employee didn't show up to work, right? But in the military, we know all this stuff. We track it. We are data files when it comes to this. So we keep our finger on that pulse pretty well. And so folks like myself are trained in certain type of intervention techniques and things, which I really can't share a lot of that proprietary material with you guys today. So what I'm going to be presenting to you is some original content, drawing from some best practices, drawing from some some of the stuff that we know in our organizations. And so that's a little bit of my background. My suicide intervention work, I guess, has really, in the civilian side, it was post-vention. It was after the fact. That's what post-vention is, working with families, sometimes officiating their funerals and things like that. Again, I'm a clergy guy, so I get asked to do stuff like that. In the military side, there's been the post-vention work. There's also been some very direct intervention, all the way from private counseling sessions in my office where people share with me things and some of their intentions, to some real crazy stuff with police and guns and alcohol and just some crazy stuff that I've been part of. And so what I want to do, and the way that this is best going to work for us tonight, is to really raise your hand and ask questions. I know you have a little, you can raise your hand button. Let's not use the button unless you absolutely have to. Why don't you physically just say, hey, got a question, and then I'll call on you, unmute yourself and ask. This can be just me talking for 25 minutes or us all growing and learning together for 45. One of those options is better than the other. So let's create some of that. When we talk about suicide and resiliency, we're talking about a continuum of color from green to yellow to orange to red. Our goal is always to stay in the green, but it's not if, but when yellow is going to creep into our life, orange, and sometimes even red. Hello, young lady there in the bottom corner. Oh, we lost her. And so what I want to do is go over some common issues that people face in life that can put us at risk for suicide. Just because I say something like the first one, I'm going to talk about financial issues. Just because you have financial issues doesn't actually mean you're at risk for suicide. What it does mean is that you're a very normal human. And what we want to talk about is what we do with those bags, that baggage. Imagine each one of these issues is a brick. Now, a common brick that goes into a chimney or on your house, that weighs 5 pounds. At your strongest, you can maybe figure out how many pounds over how many hours in, say, a backpack, okay? But eventually, it's going to become burdensome. And so it's not if, but when we experience some of these risk factors, and it's also about what we do with them when we experience them. So number one, this is a yellow issue. I want to talk about things that can put us in the yellow. Financial issues. Financial issues are something that we're all going to deal with. We've all had times where there's more month at the end of the money. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
All right. Woo! And just because you have that doesn't mean you're like, I think I'm going to take my life. You know, doesn't mean that. But let's add on some stuff. Let's add on to some crippling drug or alcohol addiction stuff, some substance abuse stuff. We sprinkle some of that in there. Again, by itself, an average, healthy, resilient person can say, man, I got to hop on the wagon. I got to dial it back in my life. I got to stop doing some of these behaviors. It's destructive. It also might contribute to the money issues, okay? Recent loss of a loved one. Show of hands, has anybody ever lost a parent, a sibling, a child, any of this? A profound loss in your life? Anyone? Okay. My mother died when I was 23 years old, when I was in the Marine Corps. So I experienced at an age much similar to a lot of the age that you guys are, one of those big, profound losses. It's not if, but when, as humans, we encounter it. It's true. Mortality is still 100% effective. Feelings of insignificance. Now we're starting to get into some deeper waters. We're still in the yellow stuff, but we've gone through 5 of these: financial, substance abuse, loss of a loved one. Now number 4, deep sense of insignificance. When we start feeling all of this stuff, we can start to unravel a little bit. A general sense of just being withdrawn. Okay. Now, socially, not just in this country, but around the planet, we don't have to look much further than 2020 to get a sense that almost 100% of us have felt something like this. And in fact, lockdowns and things like that we've often experienced in the last year in varying degrees of intensity and obedience, I understand that, can lead not only to some of these feeling issues, but also some of the other negative stuff. We maybe did too much Amazon shopping and now we got financial issues. We did a little too much day drinking and now we got ourselves in some trouble with some substance abuse. Another issue would be parenting. Are any of you parents, moms or dads out there? I don't think, okay, so just me. All right. Well, I'm one of those parents who actually enjoys their kids, but I have many parent friends who in the last year are like, get these people out of I don't want to look at them anymore. And we've created a society where you don't actually have to parent a lot because daycares will do it for you. I mean, you're going to sleep 8 hours a day. So then there's 2/3 of a day. And 1/3 of that, they're going to be in school or daycare. You really only have 8 hours of interaction with these little people. And you can break that up before school, daycare, and after school, before bed. So you really only actually have to actively parent people, a couple hours a day. and now parents have been faced with this thing. So this thing that a couple of folks set out to do that was supposed to be this zesty enterprise in their life, making these people, is suddenly part of a real problem and is putting them in the yellow. Let's move to some other stuff here. We're going to talk about the orange. Any of you married? I'm married. Anybody else married in here? No. All right. Also, normally I give this talk in front of an audience of hundreds of people. So the feedback is there's more, there's a little different life experiences out there. Marriage issues can be one of those things where oh, good for you there, engaged one. Marriage issues, again, something that can be a sense that we can derive so much joy and pleasure from in life, but can also be the thing that can make us feel insignificant or lonely or angry or whatever, because we entered into some intimate type of relationship and they're just not perfect. I tell people when I do couples counseling, if you found a perfect partner, then get away from them because you will corrupt them. If they're perfect, okay, leave them alone because they're good and you're just going to jack them up. Loss of interest, and this is another orange category thing. When we experience a loss of interest in things that we otherwise are somewhat interested in, specifically sex, food, and hygiene practices. I spent 8 months in Afghanistan from the summer of 2011 to the winter of 2012. And it's most noticeable with a woman, but when I would have one of my female, I worked with CBs, which are combat construction men. And when a woman would come to me for some counseling or something, I could usually tell that her countenance was off because I could tell by her hair that she just wasn't washing it and taking care of herself the way that she normally would. When we have a real dip or a real loss of some of the things, and it doesn't just have to be food, sex, hygiene. It could be an exercise regimen. It could be healthy eating that gets substituted with door dashing Big Macs every day, right? Another 2020 trend. When we start finding in ourselves, or when we notice this in other people, that the things that used to normally make them really robust, exciting individuals, and those things are gone in their life, it's cause for some concern or some question. Another orange issue, guilt and shame. Does somebody, and I'll talk for a second, but think about what a difference between guilt and shame is. And when you come up with something, just throw your hand up, and I'm going to mute it, and you're going to talk, and I want to hear what you have to say. We can, part of the loneliness, the withdrawal, the things that we can, that can kind of have us circling the drain. Guilt and shame is a huge one. in my line of work, I see you, Tim, I got you in a second. We deal with something called moral injury. And it's typically from a combat situation where somebody engaged in a behavior that they feel totally embarrassed or ashamed of. It could be, and it's typically not an act of cowardice, but an act of maybe they shot the wrong person or something like that, where they have what's called moral injury. And it's this deep sense, and it's a little bit of guilt, and it's a little bit of shame, and it's all kind of mixed in there. Tim, tell us what you got.
Yeah, I guess I think of the difference is like guilt is usually focused on like an act, whereas like shame can be kind of like focused on like on yourself or on your, I don't know, sense of worth. Maybe, I'm not sure.
I think you might have been muted there, Baron. I'll go first.
Right.
So I think I explain things by examples. So like Tim, I completely agree with you. I was going to use the example being a fitness professional. Like guilt might be a result of an action that did or did not happen. So like guilt could be a feeling of like you're on a health kick and you maybe you ordered your Big Mac on DoorDash, and then the shame feeling could have this spiraling effect of this feeling of insignificance that's a little bit deeper because maybe it happens a few more times and then you just start feeling this sense of like hopelessness. So that I feel like guilt is like an action, at least to me, and then shame is like that's deep.
Yeah. Connor.
Yeah, I feel like adding on to Tony and Tim, what you both were saying, I feel like guilt is kind of something very internal that like I could probably be all completely on my own and probably feel guilt about something I'm doing. And I feel like shame is more pressed on me from something external. So like another person pressing shame on me. Like I wouldn't feel shame if it wasn't for the existence of other people. So guilt internal, shame I think of external pushing against me.
I think I concur with all that too. Akash?
I think guilt is derived from an action. So like Tony gave an example of getting the Big Mac. In the moment, it doesn't seem like a bad thing, but if you get Big Macs on the long run, the shame comes from the results of eating so many Big Macs over time.
Sure. So I think we get it. When we, guilt and shame is one of those we all know. We all know it when we're experiencing it. None of us like it. It's uncomfortable, and it's one of those puts us in the orange. Now again, a couple things in the yellow, a couple things of orange. Especially if you got a couple of these oranges but no yellows. You know what? You're just living life, man. It's not. We don't have to do intervention in you. But when you start looking around your community, when you really have your finger on the pulse of your friends, your loved ones, your families, and you see this stuff, people will leave little breadcrumbs, okay? Somebody may not be so bold to come up to you and say, I'm thinking about suicide. But what they might do is leave little breadcrumbs. And for the savvy individual like us in this virtual space right now, we're now going to be able to pick up on those breadcrumbs and address it. In the orange, legal issues. Holy cow, can those things seem insurmountable? And it could be traffic tickets. It could be something more severe, but it's any of you guys ever been to court for anything? Raise your hand. You ever been to court? Okay, I've been to court a couple times for speeding tickets. And once I hit a car and I broke their windshield and it was terrible. Everybody was fine. But just knowing, I got to do this thing with my insurance and the police and the court. It's just one of those things that was looming overhead, a little gray cloud. Okay. And then there's loneliness. And I'm not talking about, well, I'm an introvert. I kind of like to be by myself and curl up with a book. I'm talking about I feel alone in the world. Nobody sees me. Nobody knows my story. I live in this state of isolation, kind of loneliness. There used to be this thing called malls. Anybody remember a mall? Thousands of people congregate to shop, okay? And there's a food court. And the food court always seemed to house restaurants that you couldn't find anywhere else. I've never been to a Sparrow Pizza other than the kiosk in the mall, right? I think we all know.
Yeah.
And Panda Express, maybe that's a real restaurant. Maybe it just exists in the mall. But you can sit in the mall food court and be totally alone and surrounded by thousands of people. That's loneliness, surrounded by thousands of people. Totally alone. Let's talk about some red. These are some of the biggies right here. Extreme risk taking. And I'm not talking Alex Honnold, one of the greatest rock climbers ever, you know, free soloing El Capitan. That's not an extreme risk for him. He's a professional athlete. But I'm talking about Baron Miller has never ridden a motorcycle because he's afraid of going fast and dying. And then suddenly I go out and I buy a super fast motorcycle and I conveniently forget to wear my helmet. This extreme risk-taking behavior that you might see people who otherwise would have this strong value of their life. And suddenly it seems to just, they're acting crazy, man. Prior suicide attempts. That's huge. If you have suicide in your family, it's almost a scourge that can run through a family system. Or if you've struggled with this in the past, statistically, you're likely to continue to struggle with it. That's just real. It's not shameful. It's not shaming people. It's just, that's the statistic. And then here's another one, simply stopping caring about anything. Great, well, who cares? If I get this, I don't care anymore. I just don't care. All right. It's a misnomer. You know, when you watch television, you think that everybody who dies by suicide leaves a note, because there's always a note in the crime show or whatever. Of those 24 suicides that I've been to, well, and then some more in the military, I've seen 2 notes, just 2. That's it. Most people don't leave notes. And sometimes when I'm working with a family and they'll say, Bob was doing great. Bob used to have depression, or Bob, you know, but for the last 3 months, 2 weeks, a year, he's been fine. It's been wonderful. Well, it's because what actually happened is Bob stopped caring. And so everything in Bob's life started getting better because Bob had a plan. He had a plan for suicide. That's real. When people have a plan and they know how they're going to execute that plan, the things that used to plague them and bug them seem to not affect them anymore because they've got a plan. It's a deep, deep, profound way of stopping and caring. Okay, so here's what we do. Right now we've got like 15 or so different types of risk factors. Again, each one is a 5-pound brick. I can successfully march around. I've carried 20 pounds, just 20 pounds, but I've done it for 52 miles once. Okay, and I've done more weight for 30 or 40 miles. So I know what I'm capable of. I'm not capable of 75 pounds for very long. I'm just not. My hips, my knees, I'm in my mid 40s. Like, it's just, the body can only take so much. And so in the military, in the Navy specifically, we have an acronym, and I'm going to share it with you. It's ACT. Ask, Care, Treat. If you're a note taker or a mental note taker or something like that, ask, care, treat. It's this simple rubric that we can all kind of use to help us figure out some of this. By asking, we simply ask the question of the person that we care about, are you thinking about suicide? Has any of you ever done that kind of intervention on somebody before? Ask them directly and specifically about suicide. Okay, 1. All right. I've obviously, in my job, I've done it, you know, many, many times. And when you first do it, it's like a slow peel of a Band-Aid. You're just like, oh, this is so uncomfortable. I want everybody, here's what I want to do. I just want you to get the words out. So everybody unmute yourself and say these words. Are you thinking about suicide?
Are you thinking about suicide?
Thinking about suicide.
All right, thank you. So you've all said it now, not that weird. And, you know, I get the average person or audience might come up with some pushback around this. They say, well, if we ask somebody and they're not thinking about it, what if we're giving them the idea, right? What if we're planting the seed? I'm going to tell you, if we were that easily manipulated as people, then I would like to consider a seed for you all right now. I would like a $50 deposit into my bank account on the 1st and 15th of every month from all of you. I'm planting the seed. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Asking somebody about suicide is some real hallowed ground, because you're taking the intimacy level of that relationship all the way to 100 miles an hour in a moment, because you're asking somebody something that is super personal. And the worst thing that they're going to say to you is the best thing, which is, no, I'm not. No, that's not what I'm thinking at all. Good. Thank you. And then your conversation with them is going to go in the right direction. Okay. Notice when I had you say that, are you thinking about suicide, or are we talking about suicide? Because maybe you're engaged in a conversation with somebody and they're like, yeah, I'm depressed, or it's dark, or whatever. Once you get the words out, you got to actually say the specific words. Are we talking about suicide? Are you thinking about suicide? I don't encourage people to say, are you thinking about committing suicide? Because that's one of those external, like, you're going to commit. Like, what else do people commit besides suicide? Crime, exactly. So let's just say you're a parent and your child dies by suicide. The last thing you want to hear is, my kid committed suicide, because it sounds like a criminal act. So are we thinking about suicide? Are we talking about suicide? Is that what this conversation is? If we were to say something like, you're not going to go do something stupid, are you? It's another one of those shameful things. And in the military context, maybe not everybody I've worked with is a loving, kind, religious leader with a cross on their collar like me, okay? Sometimes I've worked with some pretty rough folks. That's the kind of stuff that just, you're not gonna go do something stupid, are you? It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Again, you're telling the person their plan, their thought is dumb and it's stupid. You're not gonna hurt yourself, are you? Hey, in this person's mind, you know, putting a .357 round in their head is not gonna hurt at all. So when we talk about suicide, when it comes to the ask part of ACT, it's just got to be very clear and very direct. And that will quickly steer the conversation to, yeah, that's what we're talking about. I need some help. And it's like, boom, you picked up on the breadcrumbs and you're winning right now, because you're on the right side of helping this person and they know how much you love them. And that's the other thing. If you were to say something like that to somebody and they're like, no, man, how could you say that to me? What are you thinking? Man, I just love you enough to ask the hard question. So it's a weird thing. It's intimate, but I think when it's rooted in love, you're not going to go wrong, because again, you're treating that space very specially. So asking is like saying to somebody, your pack is full. Okay, you're carrying a lot of bricks. Are you okay? Are we talking about suicide here? To care is to actually do something to help the person. Hey, can I take some of those bricks out of your pack? Ask and care. To care, and we're going to spend some time on this piece here, care. Because some of the stuff that we talk about care, this is where we're getting into resiliency, we're going to get into self-care, and we're going to get into just some healthy relationship stuff with other people that we care about in life. Caring for people is the first step for someone at risk. But there's more, because if you're on the edge or you're super nervous, you got to take your own pulse first. I remember as a young Marine, I was our helicopter landed in North Carolina on a freeway, or not a freeway, on a highway, and we were tasked to pick up a patient, a trauma patient, bad car accident. This lady was really jacked up. And me and the corpsman go out, and this was the first like real medical emergency I went on, and I was eager and hopped up, and I was carrying half of the litter, and my corpsman was carrying the other half, and I was like running, and the corpsman was walking, and I was like, come on, man, we gotta go, we gotta hurry up. And he goes, check your own pulse first, just relax, take a breath, okay? So when we do this kind of intervention stuff, check your own pulse first, relax and take a breath. You're no good to anybody else if you're really all hopped up and acting crazy. And so, you know, the resilient person is not only suicide safe for themselves, but also capable helpers. And that's the other part of what we're talking about today, is not only your own personal health, but also how you're a helper to others. And so this brings us to kind of wade into some of the resiliency waters. Who's got a definition of resiliency? No wrong answer, just throw something out.
I'm happy to share. To be able to kind of just continue to keep your composure or battle through life when it's not always going your way. You know, I know we have our own fancy definition within our well-being model, but I think that's how I would define it personally.
Sure. You know, the simple definitions are more easily remembered than the big fancy ones. For me, it comes down to Tigger. You know, Tigger, Pooh Bear's friend. What do Tiggers do? Alex, what do Tiggers do? They bounce. Tiggers like to bounce. I'm a Tigger. Tiggers like to bounce. Tiggers bounce back. It's that simple. That's basic resiliency at its core. It's being able to bounce back from hard stuff. Tiggers like to bounce. Resiliency is about bouncing back, and we build it by aligning our values with our actions. We're going to circle back to that one here in a moment, how to build resiliency. When I was in my undergrad, a long time ago, I learned something that I've never forgotten. And that is that the Chinese have two characters for the concept of crisis. Has any of you guys ever heard of this before? What I'm about to say? The Chinese have two characters for the concept of crisis. One character means threat, and the other character means opportunity. A crisis is either a threat or an opportunity. That is resiliency. Looking at a situation, we could, again, let's look at 2020. A lot of people looked at 2020 and said, this is a threat. Some people looked at it and said, this is an opportunity to cultivate resiliency. You know, this is maybe if being healthy is going to make me more COVID safe, I'm probably going to put the Dorito bag down and start doing some burpees. Or maybe I'm going to start walking more, or maybe I'm going to, you know, I don't know what, but, or some people have just kind of, you know, gone further down the drain, right? If you were already struggling with some yellow or some orange or some red stuff in life, COVID probably didn't help, okay? Probably exasperated all of that stuff. My friends that have anxiety disorders, this has been like a terrible year for them. So when you can take a knee, face outboard, and hydrate, times like now when you're in college and maybe things are going well for you, and we're having talks like this, and we're online, which means we all have computers and fancy phones and technology, and we all have lighting in our house, and I'm assuming there's heat and there's water and plumbing. These are the times to start cultivating some of this resiliency, so that when the next batch of crap gets dumped on your life, you're a little more capable for handling it. So every crisis can present either a threat or an opportunity. If that idea really rings true with anybody, and you've got a little story or a little narrative, jump in and just tell me what has that meant for you in your life. Yeah, go.
Yeah, I'd like to share. I have a friend who is, I think I might be echoing just as a little bit. Liz, are you able to mute real quick? I don't know if I was. So I've got a buddy who actually was a student supervisor with us at Ohio University Campus Recreation back when I was a graduate assistant. And he really took COVID as an opportunity for sure. He actually used to do financial advising and he hated his job. I could tell he hated it. He was super passionate about fitness and wanting to help others. And during the pandemic, he had already had a online coaching business, but 10 TV in Columbus actually did a recent article on him, and he actually was able to take his coaching business to the next level and continue to help people through taking the COVID-19 pandemic as an opportunity to serve others doing something that he loved. It would have been easy for him to say like, oh crap, gyms are closed and now I'm sidelined and I can't help people in person. But he was innovative in his approach, and I would just made me a proud, like, OU alum, knowing that he was coming from Bobcat Nation as well and used to work for us at the Ping Center, and was doing what he loved and demonstrated resilience to the utmost, and his business is thriving and he's helping others doing something he really enjoys. So not a personal story from me, but it touched me because he was a part of our operation.
Yeah. Threat or opportunity. I'll tell you a fun military story. So I'm stationed here in Columbus and I do recruiting of chaplains. Before I was here, I worked for an organization called MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command. So I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and Marine Special Operations, it's much like Navy SEALs or Green Berets or some of these other organizations you've heard of. And I had 2 of my guys were deployed to Burkina Faso in Africa, a small little country. And not far from where they were staying, a hotel was overrun. I don't think it was Boko Haram or ISIS. Maybe it was Boko Haram. They took over the hotel and they had 140 hostages. Well, in light of Benghazi and knowing what happens in bad situations when you ask for permission, my guys chose instead to ask for forgiveness later. And these 2 Marine Raiders and 2 Navy SEALs jocked up and went into the hotel. They killed all the bad guys and they rescued 140 civilians. 4 people. It's, when you work with and get to know people that have done some crazy stuff like that in life, you realize, oh, these are some next level thinkers and livers. They look at a crisis and they're like, oh, there's an opportunity. Yeah, I can, there's an opportunity to save a ton of people, take out some bad guys. And so anyway, let's talk about some resiliency factors. And I want to do this one. I'm going to read them kind of slow. And I want, if anything comes to mind, just chime in and speak to a couple of them, what your thoughts are. I've got written down 15 of them. I have honor, I have courage, commitment, I have mind, body, spirit, loyalty, morality, self-betterment, drive/failure, family, I have religion, success, adversity, and willpower.
I can speak quickly on 2 that came to mind for me. Courage speaks to resiliency, in my opinion, with risk taking. I think there's an element of, like, when you have the courage to want to do something, you are able to be self-aware enough to know that there's going to be an associated risk with it, but how willing are you to take that risk and know that the reward or that opportunity is going to be well worth the risk.
Yeah, I'll speak to loyalty real quick. I'm thinking about like loyalty with family and friends, and since even just like resiliency and friendships, and just the importance of sticking by close friends, family, even when they mess up bad, like knowing that like I can speak to that and call them out, call them higher, but still maintain that friendship and build that, and not just drop a friend because they've messed up or they've hurt me in some way. And I think that's really important for me is with family and friends, just like resiliency and sense of loyalty.
I think of the drive and the failure. I think failure is a powerful resiliency developer. I tend to overshoot every goal that I set, hoping I get there. But if I don't hit the goal, I made it farther than if I had set no goal. That's kind of fail. I'm a good failure, I guess. I overshoot. I'm the guy that says I'm going to go out and walk 50 miles and I only make it 41, But it's like, well, that's 41 more than I would have made it if I stayed at home and just ate a bag of popcorn, right? And watched TV. So I tend to overshoot, and there's a lot of learning. And I'd say, yeah, failure, most of my lessons in life, and I bet if most of us are really reflective, could say we've probably learned more from our mistakes than our successes. Successes aren't always great teachers because we just glass over them, you know? Oh yeah, I got my driver's license at 16. Great, that's what everybody does. But you sure learned from that car accident, you know? What else?
Self-betterment came to mind as well. I actually got into like a personal story for me. I actually went through some hard times as a teenager. 16, I battled an eating disorder, and I went from a healthy 130-pound lanky kid down to 107 pounds. And my pediatrician said, "Hey, Tony, you need to put on some weight." And I said, "Okay, cool. Well, I want it to be healthy weight," because I had a distorted self-image of my body and what I look like. But through, becoming, more educated on how best practices to do some different things, I found my calling for like something bigger, which was, hey, I really enjoy this process and I want to be able to help others. So like that self-betterment piece, and there probably was a couple others from the words that you mentioned that, that I learned, that's my most monumental like life experience that kind of turned me into my career where I'm at today and wanting to help others with fitness and well-being. So like that's, for me, my resiliency was navigating that eating disorder. I could have easily said heck with it and kept running addictively and counting calories as a teenager, but that was for me a personal experience.
I think what's interesting too is some of these we'll call them self-protecting barriers to suicide, little dams that we can put up, can also, if we just change them just a little bit, they could also be things that are in orange or red or yellow, like failure, like adversity, things like that, like family. Family for a lot of us is this thing that's really healthy. But if you come from a really toxic or unhealthy family system, then that's not a real barrier for self-preservation. It could be contributing to part of a problem. All right. I want to talk about kind of the big three real quick, and I'm very aware of the time. You guys have been really great, so I'm going to kind of move through this next piece of content a little faster. When I talk about the body, I think the body, the mind, and the spirit are really central to this. This is the triumvirate right here. The body, we have a culture of fitness. We can build resiliency with the body. That's vital, obviously, to physical health and to well-being. Any good doctor will tell you if you're struggling with depression, you need to do some exercise. That endorphin release is super healthy for you, super healthy. Now, the trouble with depression is it also lowers our motivation. So if you got a motivation problem, but most of us can say, getting out and going for that walk or that run or doing those push-ups or whatever it was, boy, that just felt good. A day of manual labor, pushing the lawnmower around, it just feels good. So we can build resiliency through building the body. We can build resiliency with the mind. You guys are all doing that. Most of you at least are college students. Well, actually, a bunch of you are just tourists in here that are not students, that are just friends of Liz's, which is great. I'm glad that you're here. But the resources that we have to train the mind are better now than ever. If your phone is like mine, your podcast app is loaded with subscriptions to your favorite talker, healer, whoever is out there talking, right? You're either a disciple of Tim Ferriss, or you're hanging out with Rich Roll, or you got Joe Rogan on there, or whatever person of the moment you're listening to. We've got books. We don't even have to read the book anymore. The phone can just talk at me the book. I'm just listening to Anthony Bourdain's book right now, with Anthony Bourdain telling me about his life. It's I think better than if I read it, because I just sound like me, College education, I know, is thick in this space right here as well. Undergraduate degrees, graduate degrees. If we want, though, a full spectrum of resiliency, we begin with the body or the heart. We develop the mind or the head, but they need to expand to the spirit. When the head and the heart are connected, the spirit can thrive. Now, spirit is different than religion. I'm not assuming that this is a religious group. I'm not assuming that everybody needs a faith practice. Obviously, I'm the clergy guy, so for me, that's pretty foundational. The spirit can sound religious, but for the non-religious, spiritual resiliency is still important. The spirit picks up where the mind and the body leave off. Anybody have a thought on the role that your spirit plays in your health? Yeah, Kosh.
I could be completely wrong, and please correct me if I am, but I feel like your spirit is kind of like your second-hand person. It kind of either hypes you up or puts you down or gives you the confidence to do something or holds you back from doing something.
I like that. And here's why I like that, is because it defies logic. The mind is where the logic comes from. The heart or the body is a natural governor. You either can or you can't. The spirit's role in connecting these takes you to somewhere else. Do you guys remember, do you guys ever see The Dark Knight Rises, the Batman movie, the third Batman trilogy movie where Batman fights Bane? You guys remember this? Batman and Bane are fighting. Okay, Alex, you're going to have to go rent it. Batman and Bane are fighting. Bane is whooping on Batman. And he says in his like muffled voice, he says, I wondered what would go first on you, your mind or your body? And then he smashes him, right? So the mind and the body leave off and the spirit picks up. So then Batman gets chucked into this underground prison in like Egypt or something, and he starts doing a bunch of CrossFit, and like 5 months later he's healthy, and then he goes and he wins the world, right? That's the Batman movie in a nutshell. All right, but it's like Bane says, I wonder what's going to go first, your mind or your body? Well, when you lose both of those, this other thing can take over and push you to a new, to places that say, I'm going to go in with 4 magazines of ammunition and take out all the bad guys and save all the hostages. Like it's just next level stuff. Okay. In all of the risk factors that we discussed earlier, the yellow, the orange, and the red, they are like a tsunami, and the spirit has the ability to reduce the tsunami to a ripple. Remember that. All the risk factors are the tsunami in life that's crashing down, and the spirit can reduce it to a ripple. That is the power of having spiritual resiliency. Spiritual resiliency inspires hope. It allows for forgiveness. It helps us to overcome regret, to conquer fear, and it insulates our brokenness rather than succumb to isolation. And here's how it's done. This is the crux. We're about to land the plane, folks. Here's how it's done. This is how you build the spirit, and it's as simple as this. If you put your fist out toward the screen, okay, you need to think, what are values I can fit in here? And what are values I hold like this? What you decide goes in here, these are the non-negotiables, okay? These are the non-negotiable values. For me, I can tell you what I can hold on to dearly. I can hold on to my faith. I can hold on to my family and what that means. And again, because I'm the military guy, I can give a good, proper answer like honor, courage, and commitment, or semper fi, rah, rah, some of that stuff, okay? But by and large, there's not a lot that's going in here. But once I've determined what's in here, and it's non-negotiable, I now have an ethos that can guide me, okay? A shoreline that keeps me tethered to the place of safety and security. And everything else I can hold on to like this. All of this job that I do, I hold on to like this because it's not my value. My value isn't tied up into it. And neither should yours be. All the titles or the medals or the things that society imposes on you, man, that's the stuff that you hold like this. I'm a capable worker in other fields. I've always thought if I wasn't an officer in the military, I'd be a great janitor because I love the instant satisfaction derived from cleaning. Am I right, Liz? Mm-hmm. I keep a clean house, okay? The spiritually resilient individual is grounded in their values and their identity. And when you have that grounding, you are less likely to succumb to rash decisions, especially around suicide. When I was 5 years old, we had this thing. It would come every year in November. It had 1,900 pages, and it was called the Sears catalog. And the best section of the Sears catalog was the toy section. And I would open it up and I would circle all the toys and I'd conveniently leave it out for my mom to see what would. And one year I wanted these Incredible Hulk inflatable muscles. I strapped them on me and my parents, they blow them up and I had a bicep and I had some deltoids and I had some pecs and I put a t-shirt over it and I looked like the Incredible Hulk. Okay. And guess what? Within 1 year's time, I didn't want that anymore. It wasn't nearly what I thought it would be because I did get it, by the way, and I realized that they tore. They weren't actually very resilient. I went to those 24 scenes of suicide, and in every one, I thought to myself, if the person who took their life could have flashed forward 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 hour, and seen the ripple effect of this behavior on those that they love, I like to think they would have made a different choice. That's real. Insulating yourself with spiritual resiliency, knowing what goes in here now, sooner than later, doing the self-reflection and figuring it out. And oh, by the way, it's a living, breathing document. It changes because most of you are quite young and it's going to change. It's going to change with family. It's going to change with moving. It's going to change with employment. It's going to change, in time. It helps protect you from that Sears catalog syndrome of I want it, I need it, and then I get it, and I'm like, not so much. For those of us who are not as grounded, our foundation is crumbling. We need to get them help. Act, ask, care, treat. This is the third one. Now, as the amateur helper, your job is not to treat these people. Your job is to get them to a place of treatment, okay? And we won't talk because we're about out of time. Obviously, any medical professionals, if it requires police intervention, I've done this before. I've called 911 and told them to dispatch somebody to a home because this person had made, very overt suicidal threats, all this kind of stuff. I'm going to end with this quote from Lao Tzu. A Chinese philosopher wrote a book called The Tao Te Ching. And he says this: go to the people, live among them, learn from them, love them. Start with what they know, build upon what they have. But of the best leaders, when their task is finished, the people will say, we have done it ourselves. There are not enough mental health, behavioral health, social worker, counselors on the planet to handle every single need out there. Just doesn't exist. There's not enough physical training coaches, Anthony, that can coach everybody. We need a community approach to be suicide-safe communities, suicide-safe schools. We need communities and roommates and friendships and these sorts of things in our life. So go to the people, learn from them, love them, start with what they know, build upon what they have, but of the best, the people say we did it ourselves. Healthy communities do not come from subject matter experts. There's only one of me per every 500 to 1,500 people I serve. So it's all about equipping people to be able to take care of the task for you. We have 2 minutes left. Thank you for being attentive participants.
So thank you everyone, for just interacting so much. I feel like that was really, really helpful. And if you have any questions right now, you can unmute and ask. One thing that, Baron, I just wanted to ask you, and I know that you touched upon this in the beginning, but how can students see a crisis more as an opportunity than a threat moving forward? And from this talk, I know that you mentioned it in the beginning, but just what is like one way that they can see it more as an opportunity?
When I worked at MARSOC, they have a motto, Spiritus Invictus. Indomitable spirit is their part of their ethos, to have an indomitable spirit. And it is small steps, right? You don't get off the couch and run the marathon, you train and work up to the marathon. So I think honestly, there's never been a better time for this kind of conversation than the beginning of 2021 after 2022 and a pandemic and all that, to do some reflecting and say, I'm just gonna get real. Look at yourself and say, am I proud of how I handled myself? Did the wheels come off of the clown car in the last year? Or can I look back and say, no, that's pretty good. And doing an after action on yourself, or an autopsy on yourself after events, after situations, whether it be a real threat or a crisis type situation, and then looking at where you can shore up weaknesses, I guess. That and the deciding what's in here, and you can go do your own silent retreat for 1 hour or 1 day, or come off the phone in the morning and just start thinking, what are these values? Because if I can define it now, then I've got something that can help guide me in the future.
Perfect. Well, everyone, thank you so much, Baron. I just appreciate your time, and thank you again for everyone that did join. I know that this is something that each student and every person in the world needs to hear. And so I just appreciate your time being able to train us and just inform us about how we can live in community and how we can best serve the people around us that we love. So Baron, just thank you again. And I just appreciate everyone, and thank you for staying around and just being so engaging.
Thank you all. Blessings and peace. Good night.
Thank you, Baron.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Baron. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet.